When we look up at the night sky and try to imagine how the universe began, we instinctively picture an explosion, a sudden, violent outward burst of energy, shattering the void. We apply that same logic down here. When we stand at the edge of a massive canyon, our first thought is of sheer aggressive power. We assume a landscape this vast could only be carved by a dominant, overwhelming physical force. This instinct, the idea that physical reality is built and shaped by the active, unchecked exertion of power, is entirely backwards. Space, energy, and solid matter are different ratio sizes of a single continuous field. The only difference is varying density. If an infinite fluid presses inward from all sides, that catastrophic pressure should instantly crush the delicate structures it surrounds. At the microscopic level, matter is incredibly fragile. Increasing the ambient pressure of this field by even a fraction of a percent would fracture the walls of every atomic cavity, causing every chemical and physical boundary to collapse. If the universe is flooded with an infinite, inescapable force, what mechanism is holding back the weight of infinity to keep every microscopic structure intact? To answer that, we have to understand our own biological frame rate. Humans process reality at a specific temporal resolution, roughly 1 second per second. That is the speed our sensory instruments are calibrated to read. This spectrum shows solid matter is simply the field resolving at our observable threshold. It's the reality moving at a speed we can track. The field continues infinitely, at rates too fast or slow to process, remaining entirely invisible. Human science is an observer standing on the floor of a vast river. We map the water we can feel, but we mistake the narrow limits of our own vision for the actual edges of reality. Looking up to the macro limit of our reality reveals what happens when that river flows too fast for us to see. We hit a perceptual ceiling, the black hole. The event horizon is often pictured as a literal hole in space, a sharp boundary or a vacuum consuming everything around it. The actual mechanics follow an exponential curve. As matter accelerates, it eventually crosses a threshold of 2 seconds per second, exceeding our measuring system and going dark. The black hole represents a section of the river completely saturated with matter, moving at speeds our frame rate simply cannot capture. Diving all the way down to the absolute microfloor of reality brings us to the Planck scale. At this extreme depth, we hit a state of micro-homogeny. This is the exact mathematical point where the concept of a boundary or a wall simply ceases to exist. The distinction between the empty cavity and the force filling it collapses entirely, leaving no smaller point to define where a container ends. To prevent this microscopic floor from shattering under the weight of the entire universe, the infinite force must continuously calibrate its pressure. It presses exactly up to, but strictly below, the fracture threshold of every cavity simultaneously. The physical world persists because of a continuous, calibrated restraint. Reality is the product of an infinite force actively withholding its power at every scale simultaneously. Returning to the physical river requires a total inversion of our intuition. The canyon exists as a precise history of force withheld at the walls while applied only at the floor. Every cliff face, deep undercut, and delicate horizontal layer of rock maps exactly where an infinite pressure chose to stop. Physical reality is a towering record of perfect restraint, showing the exact threshold where power was metered to match the structure's tolerance. The deeper we zoom into reality, the more fragile the architecture becomes. The more fragile the structure, the more exact and absolute the restraint required from the infinite force dwelling inside it. Even time and causality are the sequential, ticking output of that continuous calibration holding steady, moment by moment. Operating inside a finite structure does not diminish the infinite force. Holding back its power is the very mechanism that makes the sculpture possible. The universe is the delicate shape carved by infinite patience. In this architecture, the Withheld torrent is the